Hi, welcome to a director interview with Steve Carrow. Steve is running for the Richland Electric Co-op Board of Directors in a seat that's been held by longtime incumbent Gerald Wendorf. Gerald has retired from the board, or will, effective this annual meeting, and we've got a couple of candidates for his open seat. Steve is one of those that was nominated here back in early January, maybe even late December, and agreed to have his name placed on the ballot as a candidate for the board of directors. So today I'd like to welcome Steve. Steve, thanks for coming in, and as importantly, thanks for being a part of the co-op process of governance and agreeing to be considered for a director on the REC board. It's obviously, in my view, it's the most important job for anybody at the co-op is to serve as a director. And I know you and I have talked a little bit in the past when you expressed some interest in this, I think maybe even about a year ago.
Right.
And seem to have a pretty good understanding of what it takes. But we'd like to have people who are watching here today maybe get a little better idea of who Steve Carrow is and your motivations and the skill set that you might bring. So I'll maybe just ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and a little biographical information.
Sure. Yeah. My wife and I were both raised on farms in Indiana, and so we have a farming background, but we, of course, left the farms like so many farm kids did back then. And I was an engineer, a design and construction engineer for all that time. My wife taught physics and science in high school, but we were yearning to get back to the country. And so roughly 10 years ago, we started looking for property to retire to and to try to farm if we could. So roughly 4 years ago, we were actually able to afford leaving our jobs. And so we found Richland County. We found a nice little hobby farm up in the Forest Township, and we love it here. We're here to stay. And so that's kind of my quick background.
You mentioned an engineer, and I know in previous discussions I brought this up. You worked at least part of your career with a firm called Chicago Bridge and Iron.
Right.
And people will probably see that in your biography, and I just have to make a note of this because Chicago Bridge and Iron sounds like what it is, bridges and iron. But it's interesting that Chicago Bridge and Iron is a much bigger firm than just what the name might be. In fact, they were an administrator for one of the programs that we're involved with, Focus on Energy, for a number of years. And we knew them more as CB and I.
Right.
But not to be confused with engineering when we think about just bricks and mortar and steel. They were certainly a much more diverse organization than that.
Yeah, the company grew, has a broad range of things it does, but really most of it's in the energy field. Projects and things that I was involved with. I at one time was project manager for projects. Also did some design, and then the last portion of my career with Chicago Bridge was in the estimating department, where we would bid large projects, gas processing, LNG, power plants, some nuclear. So I've been around the energy industry for quite a while.
And that'll probably lead us to a little bit later. We'll ask you the question about what you think you might be able to offer as a director on the REC board. But maybe before we get there, Steve, if you can give me a little bit of it, what about this appealed to you? What made you think, this is my co-op and there might be a role for me to play here?
Right. Well, I say I'm retired, but I don't feel like I'm out to pasture. I mean, I'm still got plenty of time and energy to do things, and I think this feels like a good fit for me to give back to my community. Since we moved here, we did fostering for a while. I'm involved with the folk school, helping them try to grow and develop. But I think something like the co-op is not just what I'm interested in. I think I can give back to the community that way.
When you talk about not only giving back to the community, but if we talk specifically about Richland Electric Co-op, describe for me, if you will, what skill sets, what of your background do you think will provide value to the members that are ultimately going to select the next director for this seat?
Right.
What is it that you think you provide?
I think part of the reason is that, again, being in the industry for so long, I've been following it even after retirement. I kind of keep tabs on things. I've read the Dairyland Powers annual report, that kind of thing. And so it's an interest of mine, but it also means I have a fairly decent understanding of the issues currently and what we'll be facing with here as time goes on. So specific skill sets, like I say, I was in our estimating group, so I'm comfortable looking at numbers, assessing whether costs are reasonable or not. I don't mind diving into details when it comes to getting the in-depth research that the board needs to do when there's issues in front of them. So I think those are things that when it gets technical, I'm fine diving into things.
Well, I think we've talked, you're well aware of the responsibilities of a director, and you expressed the interest in serving in this role clearly because of not only your aptitude, but your interest and your desires to keep going with that. And it's refreshing, as we've done more of these interviews, to see the types and variety of people that express interest in serving. If there's anything, it's the lack of people willing to do the work, because it is time consuming. It takes a lot of work. But overall, as I said at the beginning, the director position is the most important position because it is the membership. And we really appreciate you putting your name in the hat, coming in today to talk to our members a little bit about the types and things that are of interest to you. And with that, if you've got any closing comments, I'll be happy to take a minute here and hear those from you, and then we'll move on from there.
All right, sure. I guess one closing thing I'd say is that I think the electrical industry in general, there's going to be some challenging volatility in the future. Right now, natural gas is not that expensive, but you've got coal and nuclear phasing out. Solar and wind they're interesting, but they're not ready to take over. So there's going to be some challenging decisions that this board and other utilities are going to have to try to figure out here upcoming. And I just feel like it's very important for boards to be on top of that and be prudent in what they figure out to do.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Steve, for coming in, and we wish you well in your campaign to serve as a director. With that, ballots will be forthcoming. If you haven't got them, you'll get them before the annual meeting, which is April 6th. Pay particular attention to the ballot instructions. Sign the envelope. That's a statutory requirement. We always remind people to do that. We typically get somewhere between 600 and 800 ballots, and about 10% of them end up not being able to be counted because of the fact we can't validate those ballots. So please take the time to follow the instructions and vote. We're seeing declining voting in co-ops. Richland has done pretty well, but we'd like to keep that up, and it's always important that you, as a member of Richland Electric Co-op, cast your ballot for the director that you think is going to be the best candidate for the board. Thank you, and stay tuned for more director interviews.